Today, we're diving into one of the most incredible origin stories ever told, the birth of a prince who is destined to change everything. And you know, this story doesn't kick off with a battle or a coronation. It starts with a dream.
But this wasn't just any old dream. Think of it more like a cosmic message, a prophecy delivered straight to a queen. It was a sign that would not only change the fate of a kingdom, but would literally send ripples across thousands of years of history.
So our story begins way back in the ancient kingdom of Kapilavastu. And there, Queen Maya Devi has a dream so powerful, so vivid, that everyone who hears it knows immediately, this is a big deal. History is about to take a very sharp turn.
Okay, let's break this down, because the imagery here is just packed with meaning. In this tradition, a white elephant, that's a symbol of pure royalty, of greatness, and a lotus flower represents enlightenment. So this dream isn't just some random sequence of events, it's a message, a cosmic forecast of the divine nature of the child she was about to have.
So of course the queen tells her husband, King Shuddhodana, about the dream, and he immediately calls in his wisest sages to figure out what it all means. And what they tell him, well, it presents him with two completely different but equally world-changing paths for his unborn son.
So there it was. The prophecy laid out two possibilities. Her son would either be a Chakravartin, we're talking a legendary king who would conquer the entire world through power and might, or he would become a Buddha, someone who conquers human suffering itself through pure wisdom. I mean, the stakes just could not be higher.
And you can really see the king's dilemma right here. On one side, you've got the promise of absolute worldly power, a massive empire, a legacy that would echo for ages. And on the other side, a quiet path of giving it all up, dedicating a life to ending suffering. Now, if you're a father and a king, the choice seems pretty obvious, right?
And the king doesn't even hesitate. His decision is fast and final. He completely rejects the idea of a spiritual path. He's determined to shape his son's destiny, to force him into the role of a great, powerful ruler. And that one choice, right there, a father's ambition, is what sets this entire incredible story into motion.
So as if the dream wasn't enough, the birth itself was every bit as miraculous. Queen Maya was traveling, and she stopped to rest in this beautiful, peaceful place called the Lumbini garden. And it was there, right under a sal tree, that the prince decided to make his grand entrance into the world.
And what happens next is just unbelievable. First, the birth is completely painless. And then, this newborn infant, he just stands up. He takes 7 steps, and with every single step, a perfect lotus flower blossoms right out of the ground. I mean, this is clearly not the birth of an ordinary person. This is the arrival of someone truly special.
Can you even imagine? With his very first words, not a cry, but a clear, powerful sentence, the baby announces his mission to the world. It's a direct confirmation of that spiritual prophecy and, a huge challenge to his father's dreams of empire.
Okay, so back at the palace, the party is on. They name the baby Siddhartha, which means one who achieves his goal. But then, this highly respected old sage, a man named Asita, arrives, and the whole vibe just shifts. A little bit of unexpected drama is about to unfold.
So picture this, right? The wise man, the one whose approval the king desperately wants, he looks at the baby and his face just lights up with this pure joy. It's like, yes, he's the one. But then, to everyone's total shock, he just breaks down and starts crying. The whole court goes completely silent.
The king, of course, is completely alarmed. He asks the question that's on everybody's mind. Why are you crying? Is this a bad omen? Is my son in some kind of danger? You could have cut the tension in that room with a knife.
And then the reason for Asita's tears comes out, and it's not at all what anyone expected. He's not crying out of sorrow for the prince. He's crying for himself. He's overjoyed that he's in the presence of a future Buddha, but he's heartbroken because he knows he's too old. He won't live long enough to actually hear his wisdom.
Now, for King Shuddhodana, Asita's words aren't a comfort. They're a 5-alarm fire. If his son is destined to see the world suffering and give up the throne, well, the king decides he has to do everything in his power to make sure his son never sees that truth.
So, the king kicks his plan into gear. He's going to build the perfect world for Siddhartha. Basically a gilded cage filled with luxury and pleasure, totally cut off from all the harsh realities of life. No sickness, no aging, no death. He's literally going to try to defy destiny itself.
And that's the question that just hangs in the air for the rest of Siddhartha's childhood. The king has built the most beautiful prison in the world, all to force his son onto a throne.
But when a soul is meant to awaken the entire world, can any wall, no matter how high you build it, really hold it back?
All right, let's dive into the story of a prince who you'd think had it all. Prince Siddhartha. But this isn't your typical fairy tale. It's really about this huge paradox, a life designed to block out every single bit of suffering. But in doing so, it actually built a whole different kind of prison. It's a fascinating one, so let's get right into it. You know, this single line right here, it just nails the central conflict of the prince's youth. His father, King Shuddhodana, literally engineered a world of perfect comfort for him. But the real goal? It was to hide a fundamental truth about what life is really like.
So you might be asking, why would a king go to such insane lengths? Well, it all boils down to a prophecy. Right after Siddhartha was born, a sage foretold he had two possible destinies ahead of him. Path 1, he becomes a great king, a world conqueror. Path 2, he becomes a great spiritual teacher, a world awakener. Now for his dad, there was only one acceptable path. He vowed to shield his son from any sight of suffering, convinced that this would guarantee he chose the throne.
And when I say he vowed, I mean he made it an absolute law. The king took some pretty extreme measures. There's this one story where guards quietly removed an elderly gardener from the prince's path, just because he was showing signs of age. The entire palace basically became a stage, with every single person playing a part in this perfect, happy, flawless performance.
But here's the thing. You can't script a child's curiosity. A simple question like this one from young Siddhartha shows his own awareness just starting to poke through the facade. And even though the servants would get all nervous and change the subject, the first crack in that gilded cage had already appeared. He was already seeing what he wasn't supposed to.
As Siddhartha got older, the king didn't back down, he actually doubled down. He realized he couldn't just hide sorrow. He had to completely drown it in pleasure, leaving absolutely no room for anything else to creep in. This led to an environment of total, non-stop comfort.
And the scale of this whole project was just staggering. The king didn't build just one palace for his son, he built 3 of them. One for each season, summer, winter, and the rainy season. All to make sure Siddhartha would never feel even the slightest bit of discomfort from the weather. Incredible, right?
Of course, the prince got the best education money could buy. He studied literature, philosophy, he was a master archer. He learned everything a perfect ruler would need to know. So on the surface, he had absolutely everything a young man could ever dream of. But even a world-class education couldn't fill this emptiness that was starting to grow inside him.
And right here, we see the fatal flaw in the king's grand plan. Even though he's surrounded by every pleasure imaginable, Siddhartha felt like something profound was missing. Even as a kid, he could feel this inner void that his perfect world just couldn't touch.
This feeling all comes to a head during the annual plowing festival. It's a big celebration, everyone's having a great time, but the young prince, he goes and sits by himself under a tree. And it's there that he sees this tiny, quiet, but unbelievably powerful little scene play out.
It all starts so simply. He's just watching an ox pull a plow through a field, and as the earth turns over, it exposes this little, vulnerable worm to the open air. Just a totally normal, everyday thing you'd see on a farm. And then, just like that, a bird swoops down out of nowhere and eats the worm. A simple, brutal act of nature. But for a boy who's been shielded from every harsh reality, this was a bombshell. And that stark realization just hit him like a ton of bricks. One life has to end for another to continue. For the very first time, he saw this interconnected and often brutal cycle of existence. This insight was so powerful that the young prince spontaneously fell into a deep state of meditation, right there under the tree, leaving his father completely and utterly stunned.
Well, you can imagine, this event absolutely terrified the king. He saw it as a massive sign that the prophecy was coming true, that his son was drifting towards that spiritual path he feared so much. So what does he do? He doesn't change course. No, he decides to double down on his original strategy, but even harder this time.
The king's entire philosophy is wrapped up in this one quote. He truly believed that worldly pleasures and attachments were the strongest forces in the universe. He was convinced that if he could just bind his son with enough desire, he could control his destiny and keep him chained to the throne forever.
But Siddhartha's mind was moving in the complete opposite direction. While his father was busy hiring more dancers and bringing in more luxuries, Siddhartha was starting to ask these really deep philosophical questions. He wasn't just enjoying the pleasures anymore.
He was questioning their very nature, their permanence. And this, right here, is the fundamental conflict. You've got the father, whose whole goal is to control this manufactured reality inside the palace walls. And then you have the son, whose quest is to understand the true nature of reality itself. One is trying to bind, and the other is trying to know. They're on a collision course.
So, Siddhartha grows into a young man. He gets married to the wonderful and loving Princess Yashodhara. By every external measure, his life is absolutely perfect. He's got a loving wife, unimaginable wealth, high status. But even the person closest to him could feel this distance growing.
This observation from his wife is so poignant because it just reveals the truth, doesn't it? Siddhartha's inner journey was creating this invisible gulf between him and the perfect life his father had built. He might have been physically present, but his mind was already starting to wander far, far beyond the palace walls.
And that brings us to the central theme of this whole story, the gilded cage. It's the perfect metaphor for Siddhartha's situation. The luxury wasn't a gift, it was a prison. The comfort wasn't freedom, it was just beautiful golden bars, designed to keep the real world out. It's a timeless dilemma, isn't it? The question of when protection becomes its own kind of prison.
The story describes this climactic moment of realization. Siddhartha is standing alone on his balcony one night, looking out at this world he's never actually been a part of. And it's right there that the feeling finally crystallizes. He doesn't feel blessed. He feels trapped. Trapped by the very things that were supposed to make him happy.
And so, this is where we'll leave it for now, with the one question that has the power to unravel his father's entire world. This isn't just a child's idle curiosity anymore. This is the driving force of a man on the verge of a journey that would literally change the course of history. What happens when the man who has everything finally decides it isn't nearly enough?
Let's talk about a prince whose perfect world was about to get completely shattered.
So Prince Siddhartha had it all, but he just knew there was more to life.
He told his charioteer, Channa, "Take me outside. I need to see the real world."
On his first trip out, he saw an old man, frail, weak. It totally shocked him. I mean, you gotta remember, he'd never seen old age. He was genuinely confused.
And Channa's simple answer? That was the first crack in his perfect little bubble.
Next trip out, he saw someone just consumed by sickness, writhing in pain.
And he wondered, can all my money and power actually stop this from happening?
Channa's answer was a hard no. Another wall comes crashing down. Sickness gets everyone.
His third trip out was the biggest shock yet. He saw a funeral procession. Suddenly, this wasn't about other people. The question became terrifyingly personal.
And Channa confirmed it. That was it. The third truth of life hit him hard.
So you see the clash, right? His palace illusion versus the harsh reality of the world.
But then, a fourth journey. And this time, he saw a man who was completely at peace. Channa called him an ascetic, someone who gave it all up to find real answers.
And this sight sparked a brand new question. For the first time, a glimmer of hope.
So back in the palace, these foresights just churned inside him, creating a storm.
Old age, sickness, death. These weren't just ideas anymore. They were haunting him. He realized this wasn't about other people. This was his future. This was everyone's future.
He thought, how can I enjoy this luxury when the world is suffering? His perspective totally shifted.
He couldn't ignore the truth anymore. His journey within had officially begun. No turning back.
So it makes you wonder, right? What truths are hiding just outside our own palace walls?
So what would it take to just walk away from a perfect life? We're about to explore that very question through the profound inner conflict of Prince Siddhartha, the man who would become the Buddha. We'll be using the cinematic script, The Path of Awakening, to really witness that exact moment his world of pleasure began to crumble when he was faced with a truth he just couldn't ignore. Okay, so here's where the story really kicks off. Prince Siddhartha has just stepped outside his palace walls for the very first time, and what he sees completely shatters his reality. He sees sickness, old age, and death. And as the script so powerfully puts it, once seen, it could never be unseen.
So this first part is all about that illusion just shattering into a million pieces. He's back in his palace, right? Surrounded by every pleasure imaginable. But it's all completely meaningless to him now. He's physically there, but you can tell his mind is just replaying the suffering he just saw over and over again.
And this scene is a perfect example of how detached he's become. A dancer tries to get his attention, asking, "My prince, are you not entertained?" But his reply, it says everything. Forgive me, my mind is elsewhere. All the music, the joy of the court, it's all just become background noise to him. You know, a struggle this big doesn't stay internal for very long. It starts creating these ripples, and they begin to affect the two people who are closest to him in the entire world, his wife and his father. His wife, Yashodhara, she's the first one to really see that something is wrong. She looks at him and she sees right through the princely facade. She tells him, "You have changed. Your eyes carry a storm." She can feel that conflict just raging inside him.
And so he finally tells her what he saw, that raw reality of old age and sickness and death. And her reaction is so human, so understandable. She tries to pull him back to their world, pleading with him, "Then stay, be my strength." It's this powerful anchor to the life he's supposed to be living.
But the pressure just ramps up when he has to face his father. See, for the king, his son's existential crisis isn't just a personal problem. Oh no. It's a threat to the stability of the entire kingdom. It's about protecting the illusion of a perfect life, and that starts with having the perfect heir.
His father's command is pretty simple. "My son, joy is your duty. Forget what you saw." But Siddhartha's answer really reveals the impossible spot he's in. He asks, "How can I forget what is true?" And that's it, right? That's the central conflict. His duty to uphold an illusion versus this new, powerful allegiance to a painful truth.
And then, right when he's wrestling with all of this, the script introduces the most powerful human bond of all. A servant rushes in with the news. A son has been born to him.
The script just captures the weight of this moment so perfectly. A new bond was formed, and a deeper conflict was born. For Siddhartha, this incredible joy of being a father is also a powerful new chain, binding him to the very world he's starting to feel like he has to leave. As he's looking down at his sleeping son, he asks himself this question that just reveals everything about his struggle. He wonders, is this child a chain or a reminder? Is he a chain tying him to this life, or a reminder of the very cycle of suffering he now feels he has to break? Well, this leads us to the turning point. It's a moment the script calls the night of wakefulness. And this is when Siddhartha finally sees the raw, unvarnished truth that's been hidden beneath the palace's polished exterior all along. He's walking through these silent halls and he sees the performers asleep. They're not objects of entertainment anymore, they're just tired, vulnerable people. And the script notes, in stillness, illusion collapses. The party is well and truly over. And then he goes to his wife's chamber. He just stands there, watching his family sleep. And the pain and the love on his face are so real you can almost feel them. This right here, this is the heart of his choice. This is the immense personal cost of the path he's thinking about taking. His inner voice just lays out this impossible choice. If I stay, I betray the world. If I leave, I betray love. He's hit this devastating realization that no matter which path he chooses, it's going to come with an absolutely unbearable loss. And so we get to the final turning point. He's standing on a balcony, looking out over the sleeping city that he now feels distrained responsibility for, and he makes his decision.
The internal debate is finally over. He speaks his resolve out into the night sky, like a vow to himself and to the world. There must be an end to suffering. I must find it.
And in this moment of just profound, silent understanding, his loyal attendant, Shana, appears. He's been watching. He knows what's coming. In fact, he's already prepared for it.
Without even a word from the prince, Chana just says, "The horses are ready, my prince." And with that one line, that whole internal struggle becomes external action. There's no turning back now.
He lets himself have one last look at his family. There are no words. The crushing weight of his choice just fills the silence in this final heartbreaking gaze.
The script sums up this moment so powerfully. At the peak of privilege, Siddhartha stood at the edge of renunciation. He's literally turning his back on everything, on power, on wealth, on love, all in pursuit of a truth that he simply cannot ignore. And that leaves us with the central question of this whole story, doesn't it? What truth could be so powerful, what calling so urgent that it would make a person abandon a perfect world, a world of love, comfort, and privilege, all for the sake of finding an answer?